Saying hi. Let's see. So it says live and recording. Oh, stream validation in progress. Okay, that's live. Let's check Twitter.
I'm going to send the updated PowerPoint to your email.
Okay, we're live on Twitter. That's good. 10 people, and then that seems to be validated now, so let's see. That looks live.
Ja.
Also das muss einfach immer laufen. Wenn nicht, dann musst du da oben nämlich das stoppen und wieder draufdrücken. Aber im Notfall, wir haben es ja da sowieso aufgenommen.
Ja?
Ich weiß, ich muss mir meine gucken, ich muss einfach am Ende.
Don't worry. I'm sending now, sorry.
Mainstream is cool.
Ma non c'è da buttare la
Yes, we're going to show the video to the end. And we actually have a massive screen in the
We'll be starting soon, but I would like to invite everyone to come to the first two rows so we're all close together.
People have written to me and said they can see me already.
Thanks for joining. I'll hand the floor to Mr. Brando Benifei, that is hosting this event. Brando, please.
Thank you, dear colleagues, honorable speakers, dear guests. It's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to host today's event. When I first heard about the two initiatives, We Are the Children and Operazione Colomba, which will be presented today by their promoters, I immediately wanted to show my support and to find ways to disseminate here at the European Parliament their objectives and the passion that moves their campaigners, because I believe that what they have been doing truly deserves our attention and it matters to us all. In fact, with Operazione Colomba we already met a few times and we already worked together on its objectives, and we will hear about that later on. And We Are the Children, I was very happy to hear about this great initiative from my friend Daniel, from also all this mandate. We worked on many issues regarding human rights, and I'm happy that we are able today to present a new, very important action, thanks to Grigory Diktas for that. And I will now take into I don't want to take too much time. I want to say that we need to be honored to have here people who decided to take action and take react to the intolerable, horrifying effects of war, which has been pushing people away from their homes, and it triggered a seemingly endless spiral of exclusion, social injustice, and poverty. So again, I want to thank Grigory Diktas and Daniel Turkov from We Are the Children and Alberto Capanini from Operazione Colomba for being here today. The two campaigns are significantly different, and you will discover during the presentations, but I believe that they share an underlying objective. They strive to make a powerful call to give a chance for a better future to all the victims of the conflict in Syria and in the Middle East, for the sake of millions of refugees who were stripped of their prospects of life, as well as the thousands of children who have just started their life and face today a dramatic reality, stuck in a refugee camp after troublesome and dangerous journeys. Let me also thank wholeheartedly Mr. Stephen Ryan, Deputy Head of Unit for Asylum of the European Commission in DG Home, for having accepted our invitation and for being here today. The We Are the Children campaign aims at shining a light over the situation of the thousands unaccompanied child refugees from Greek refugee camps into other neighboring countries. Since the beginning of the Syrian crisis in 2011, there were 1.5 million Syrian refugees only in Lebanon, of which around 56% of all Syrian refugees in Lebanon are children. On 31st of January 2019, the National Center for Social Solidarity published a report which confirmed the number of unaccompanied refugee minors in Greece to be around 3,718. The European Parliament has been fighting to ensure that the reviewed EU asylum laws, in particular the Reception Conditions Directive, Dublin Regulation, Qualification Regulations and Procedures, all files on which I've been myself a rapporteur, either for the whole of the Parliament or for the Socialists and Democrats group. They contain, the action was to check that they contain strong provisions to protect these children, such as the elimination of detention of migrant children due to their migration status, the appointment of a guardian within 5 days upon arrival of the migrant, the presence of trained officials and personnel in contact with migrant children, child safeguarding policies in places in the hotspots, access to dignified accommodation, and immediate access to education and healthcare on an equal footing with national children of the national hosting nationality. So the reform of the asylum rules in EU, however, we have to be frank, is stuck due to difficult negotiations with the Council and the behavior of Member States, incapable of making steps forward in the direction of a reform genuinely based on solidarity and a fair share of responsibility and commitment from all the Member States. But today there is an urgent need for action in helping these children to be relocated as quickly as possible in other European states, and this requires a decisive political intervention by the European institutions and the governments of the EU member states. Unaccompanied children who have crossed the Mediterranean are among the most vulnerable people on earth, and myself, I dedicated an exhibition here in the European Parliament a few weeks ago of graphic novels, comics made by young artists, many of them also from a migrant background, telling the stories of unaccompanied children. So I'm honored to be able to continue this work and these efforts. I mentioned the legislative work. This exhibition, which has been a success here in the Parliament, also by hosting this event today. And again, going on with what we will see in this debate today, I want to mention a little more about Operazione Colomba, the non-violent peace corps of the community Pope John XXIII. They have been on the ground in Lebanon for 5 years, sharing the same living conditions as refugees in the camps. The peace proposal for Syria was drafted by Syrian refugees in Lebanon. It stems from the urgency to restore security and justice in view of a return to Syria for the many people who have been living in extreme conditions in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, as well as Europe for many, many years. The proposal was written with the support of Operazione Colomba, and during the presentation of the peace proposal, we will project today a video message from Sheikh Abdul, representative and spokesperson of Syrian refugees in Lebanon. To conclude, I want to say that we are now in the 8th year of conflict in Syria. Refugees are still living in extreme conditions in neighboring countries, Lebanon, Jordan, etc. Just a week ago, we held the 3rd Brussels Syria conference, which saw an unprecedented amount of pledges. We know the situation on the ground being still far from solved. The conflict is less intense, but it's still ongoing. Refugees are pushed to return to their countries, as I'm sure it would be their wish, but the conditions are still not there. And we have to avoid political manipulation in this sense, of which we were discussing before coming here. In the meantime, this year's conference saw an increased involvement of local civil society, which is, in my opinion, fundamental now, and will be also in the future, when the country can finally start its reconstruction for real, which will be not only physical, but also societal. That is why I particularly appreciated the work of Operazione Colomba and the fact that the proposal for peace comes from the refugees themselves, giving it a particular significance also in the light of what I was saying now. So we sometimes, to really get to my final words, feel powerless as also as institutional representatives. As we know, there is a donor fatigue towards Syria as the regime continues its violence and as other state and non-state actors pursue their own interests on the ground. But we will not stop supporting the Syrian people while we look for political solutions, and this means supporting in particular the most vulnerable, children in particular, both those who managed to come to Europe and those who live still in the camps. Throughout its many resolutions on Syria, the European Parliament has called to pay special attention for humanitarian aid, to maintain education programs for refugee children. This is vital in order for them to feel their life is not all, as sometimes it is, about fear, poverty and violence, and gives them back their lost childhood. It's very important, obviously, and I conclude again referring to that, also that the situation in Europe makes them able to be children like the others. I think this is extremely important, and I think that all these dimensions will be touched by our guest today. So I'm happy that I could bring these different but connected, meaningful campaigns together today to the attention of the European Parliament, also as a kind of act for concluding this mandate. We will soon, in 1 month, conclude all the work of the European Parliament. It's really the last weeks. Then we will have the elections, and I hope that together also with other colleagues, some of them and their offices, when they will not be available, they will join us, and some offices are already here. I want to thank them that are involved, and Cécile Kienge, Caterina Chinici, others, Silvia Costa. They will, I'm sure they will continue, Eli Schlein, they will continue working together with me, those of us who will be in the new parliament, with all colleagues, also from other countries. I mentioned the Italians, but obviously Soraya Post, Claude Moraes, and all the colleagues that have been very active on this topic. I'm sure that we can bring in the next years progress, also based on the sensibility, the attention, the content that we are getting from these very important campaigns. Thank you for being here, and the floor is, if I can introduce, I know that it will be, first of all, Grigory Richters and Daniel Turkov-Wilson, and then Wout, who is our moderator for today, will moderate also the whole of the debate. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we will hear very interesting things today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brando, also for bringing us back to all the work that already has been taking place in the European Parliament around this, and the work, and reminding us of all the work that remains to be done also in the coming mandate. I'm turning my attention now in the first place to the campaign We Are the Children. First of all, Grigory, you walked from Paris to Berlin. Why did you walk so far? What was the reason to undertake that mission?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Brando, and everybody here for coming and for organizing this event in this wonderful, important location. So first of all, I'm a filmmaker. I have no political background, so I've never been attached to any political parties, and I'm very grateful that the political parties and the Parliament are really taking note of this very important issue. And so, yeah, so I started walking really last year. I started first thinking about this because I was frustrated. I was sitting in Luxembourg in my office, very comfortable, and I watched, you know, I'm German, so I was watching what was happening in Chemnitz with the far right, with, you know, all the extremism towards foreigners. You know, I'm half Czech. You know, I've always grown up around many foreigners in Germany. I've never seen that amount of hatred that we've had in the last few years, few months. And so I wanted to do something, even if it was as simple as just getting up off my chair and walking. And so being German, I didn't want to go from Berlin into Paris. I thought that was the wrong message. So I thought the other way around, you know, having lived in the UK for a long time, having been exposed to what's going on in Calais, northern France, in 2015, in the jungle, as it was called, I felt like Paris, France, and Germany would be two very important countries for this. And I also walked via Brussels, because obviously this is a very important place. And yes, I've met some incredible people. Especially when I got into Germany, I met over 15 mayors from 15 different German cities. Most of them really supported the campaign. The idea was to raise awareness about 1,000 children who are currently still are stuck in Greek refugee camps under horrendous circumstances, and to give them a future that they deserve just like we deserve one. We're all equal. And I thought, you know, we've got to start with the most vulnerable. I mean, I'd love to walk for 68 million people that are, you know, currently fleeing. But I felt like I had to start somewhere. I had to create a goal that is somewhat realistic, where I could go to the the politicians, where I could go to the cities, where I could go to the people and say, you know, this is a realistic number. It's our responsibility because these children are already on EU soil. Being German, I thought it was important to go directly to the German government. On my route, I met two incredible people, Uwe and Danielle. Actually, Danielle and I met here in Brussels when I was just outside Parliament. And we've really bonded on this issue of you know, trying to bring a bit of equality and you know, helping these kids, you know, have a chance at a normal life. And so in Germany, actually 4 German cities already agreed to take the 1,000 children, roughly 1,000 children. You know, when I got into Berlin, the Bundestag, we got 40 German MPs who said, you know, we're behind this. They met me from every single party in Parliament, all support throughout the benches, throughout the parties. And the Human Rights Commission of the Bundestag is behind it. And the Interior Minister made it very clear, you know, this is something that could be supported if there is a European solution. And so that's why really I'm here. That's why Danielle, Uwe, and I started We Are the Children, because at first it was called I March for You. Didn't feel like the title would be fitting now, because we're not really marching inside Parliament. So you know, we felt like We Are the Children is more suitable. And so yeah, so now really not being, you know, in this kind of political arena, being very naive in that, just thinking let's just find a solution to get those kids out, especially because we are getting all this incredible support. You know, this is really where, you know, Danielle is coming in and making all of this possible. And thank you so much for really spearheading this on our side. And yes, Danielle, if you want to.
Should we watch the video now, maybe? First?
Oh yeah, sure. Should we? Yeah.
We'll see Greg in action and what inspired the campaign.
Yeah.
Hi folks, my friend Greg Richters is walking an incredible 1 million steps from Paris to Berlin. He's doing it to save 1,000 refugee children. If you agree with him that we're not doing enough in the name of common decency to help these disadvantaged people, please visit Greg's website and help. We need you. Thank you.
Tell us a bit more even about what's the situation these children are living in, because I know you have been there, and what are the steps the campaign is now aiming for, what are the goals of the campaign, how do you want to bring change?
Well, I think I'll pick up on what Brando said directly, which is civic outreach. It is not enough now, I think, in today's society just to expect politicians to represent what we all feel inside our hearts and what we want to achieve as a tolerant society, integrating people, helping them, supporting them. It is not enough to depend on Brando and 4 other people in this house to lead that. We have to give the people a voice, to give them an opportunity to see that actually they can be part of change, that actually democracy is that they can change things, they can ask for things, and that will work. And I think a lot of pressure has been put on Greece. I spent 2 years consecutively in Lesbos, and a lot of the pressure and expectations of everything they have to deliver is something that I felt should be firstly and primarily taken up by my own country. You can probably hear my British accent, and you know, by any other country, whether it be an EU member state or a non-EU member state, as a duty to help minimally the most vulnerable children. And in this case, there are many. There are those in Lebanon. There are also those that are sitting on EU soil right now. 1,000 of them that we can change and make a difference in their lives. And as Greg said, what's my expertise? Well, I've been here for 7 years in Brussels, and I've been working in advocacy, and I knew the importance of bringing everything that is this public campaign with an advocacy campaign, getting the right people together to say, look, we can really achieve this. What can we get from the Commission? How can we work with the Council? So we really wanted to come together to achieve a strategy whereby member states and different countries could accept even a small amount of these children and work together towards maybe a mechanism for evidence gathering for some of the violations that these children have experienced so far, which is something that we worked on, monitored very closely, actually working with a gentleman in the room with Nadia Murad's campaign on Yazidis, evidence gathering. When something is being violated, not least on our own soil in the EU, we can actually gather evidence about what's happening to these very vulnerable people, these very vulnerable children. So I guess what brought us here today is really a kind of unity between myself, Greg, and Uwe, who's the mastermind behind the camera, because we really feel that we needed to call upon people like you and Brando and the Youth Intergroup and the expertise of, and I have to announce, DLA Piper, who's been working really, really hard for us to show that actually it's not just a demand, it's a legal duty. And if that legal duty isn't fulfilled, then we have to ask ourselves, why are we not fulfilling that legal duty? So later we'll hear from DLA Piper on that as well. So I think that's all from me.
Yeah, and I think we can actually hear from DLA Piper right now, because indeed they'll present Caroline Brand from DLA Piper, will present the legal framework for the protection of unaccompanied minors in the EU and the work that you've been doing around it. So it's something that might just help bring the dream of bringing those young people from Greece to other member states of the EU to make this dream become a reality. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, everybody. So I am Caroline Brand, working at DLA Piper in Paris, and I'm actually an attorney in Paris, but we are involved with the pro bono practice of the firm, and we try to summarize here the legal framework for the protection of these unaccompanied minors in the EU. And so here, the first thing we want to remind here is that under various conventions in the EU, the member states should be responsible for the protection of these minors in Greece. I will briefly remind the provisions applicable with regards to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Directive 2011, under which the international protection, even if it's third country national, must be granted, and then the provisions of the Dublin III Convention that reminds the member states' responsibilities here. These conventions are binding upon all EU member states, and there is an obligation to help even third country nationals and stateless individuals to obtain an international protection. So for sure, and to remind what you said, this is a legal duty for all the EU member states. And there is an obligation to help these minors, in particular in Greece, in Camp Moria, to be granted with even the refugee status or maybe another kind of protection. Under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, all the member states shall respect and ensure the rights to each child within their jurisdiction and without discrimination of any kind, meaning race, color, language, religion, etc. For this, the states parties shall undertake all legislative, administrative, or any measures to implement the rights recognized to the children in this convention. And beyond these rights, these particular rights, there is an important one on which we want to talk particularly today. There is the possibility to get the family reunification. And here there is the EU member states' responsibility to help Greece and to help these minors to find the family in the EU and to be recognized this family reunification in a positive, human and expeditious manner, as it is said in the convention, so as quickly as possible. The other thing here is that the protection is also very important, and it's a matter of urgency here, because the protection of the children is from all forms of sexual exploitation, from sexual abuse, from any form of persecutions to these children. And it is also for any children, whether they are unaccompanied or not. The other directive that I want to talk today is the Directive 2011. And here again, all the member states are bound by this directive. And this is all about the international protection for third country nationals. And here again, if you're looking at the conventions, the member states shall help at any time if children are victim of any acts of persecution, meaning any physical or mental violence, any acts of a gender-specific or child-specific nature. And as we show on our presentation, and you heard about this previously, there is sexual violence in the camp. There is lack of access to basic services such as healthcare, food, even water, etc. And the reasons for these persecutions are political opinion, religion, gender, or even race. But under the convention, under the directive, the member states, if there is such acts of persecutions, are responsible to help those children to get an international protection. In addition to this, there is also the Dublin III regulation that provide the member states responsibility. And here again, it aims at protecting the best interest of the child. And this shall be a primary consideration that shall be taken into account by the member states, and notably for family reunification possibilities. The member states are responsible where a family member or sibling of the unaccompanied minor is legally present. And in the absence of any family member, the member state is also responsible to help the unaccompanied minor to get his application. In light of these conventions, for example, the decision and case law of the Court of Justice from the EU considered in April 2018, very recently, that even if the applicant is below the age of 18 and attains the age of 18 during the procedure to be granted with the refugee status, then it should be regarded as a minor for the purpose of the particular provisions relating to family reunifications. I mention this case law because in the Camp Moria, there are children that arrive at the age of 14 and they will turn 18 maybe in a few months or so. But if the procedure starts before the age of 18, they will still be considered to get the family reunifications provision and particular provisions. So there is definitely an urgency to start actions and to help these children as of now. So at the end of these first reflections and legal analysis of the responsibilities of the member states, we'd like to talk about our recommendations today to the Commission, to the Parliament, and to how we could act with all the EU member states. And I think there are three very important things that could help to ensure the best interest of the children tomorrow. First of all, I think it's really, really important to develop and create very fast-track access to very specific protections, such as help minors to get the family reunifications when it's possible, help minors to be relocated to other EU countries, and we mentioned it already, help minors to obtain student visa, humanitarian visas, or humanitarian corridors each time it's possible. And this is an obligation for all member states under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 4. The states and member states shall cooperate internationally to help these minors to obtain those. The second action that is, I think, really, really urgent to look after is prevent inhuman and degrading treatments. Under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, under the United Nations Convention Against Torture, each time you've got a presence of the European, so here, for example, there is the European Asylum Support Office in Greece. If you know there is ill treatments happening, you have an obligation to prevent any other ill treatments, prevent torture from happening. There is a responsibility from the EU, and for this we need to enhance EU authorities' control, resources, and monitoring. And of course, as soon as possible. Then, we'd like to talk about the development of cooperation between member states to achieve this goal, to help the protection of these children as soon as possible, for sure. And here again, it is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And for this, the member states shall help Greece to get any kind of support. But for us, we should first start to develop connections with other member states, then to develop voluntary resettlement or relocation programs. And we experience some kind of programs in France, for example, or in other states. So we know how to do it. We know how to develop these kind of programs. And for sure, if possible, or where it is possible, any financial aids, for sure. To achieve these three, I think, very important goals, it is very urgent to establish common guidelines with the other member states, and as soon as possible, we mean maybe in the next few months. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much for showing us that it's not only a moral duty, but there is also a legal obligation to protect the rights of children and ensure that our EU regulations and around it are being respected. After hearing from We Are the Children, that is trying to bring those 1,000 young people that are in Greece to other member states of the European Union, I'm going to turn to Mr. Alberto Capanini from Operazione Colomba. He just told me that he's just back from Lebanon, where he was actually in the refugee camps, living with the refugees there and supporting their daily lives. We're really looking forward to hearing from your actions there and your proposal for peace that you brought today. I want to present something that Brando in his introduction Mr. Capanini, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the possibility to be here. And I have the honor to speak in name of many refugees living in Lebanon, many Syrian refugees living in Lebanon. Lebanon, as you know, is a small state with 3.5 million of Lebanese people in there. 500,000 of them were Palestinian. And now in Lebanon is living also more than 1 million, maybe 1.5 million Syrian refugees. It means that one person each 4 is a refugee from Syria. We started living in Lebanon 4 years ago, 5 years ago almost, especially in the north of Lebanon, in a very poor region called Akkar. There is our camp, the camp we are living in is like 2 kilometers from the border. And so we have the possibility and the great honor to look at the war, speaking with people escaping from siege, from Aleppo, from Homs, from Dara, from Ghouta, and living with them. We find that way because it was the only way to speak with those people as a human. How can you say to a man, your life is important, and at the same time going back in my house, warm house, very safe situation. So our problem was to have the possibility to have a dialogue with them, and the only way to have a dialogue is have the possibility to look at the eyes of the other directly, not on an upper position, neither in a different position. The first thing they told us was when we asked them, can we live with you in a tent? They told us no. Why not? Because you are European, you are from Europe. It means for sure you are very important people. We are not, but they were thinking in this way. And so I think that they were thinking that it was impossible to live for people from Europe in such a condition. That means that they were considering themselves not as human. That's why we started living with them. The second thing was some people tried to kill us and to burn our tents. So maybe if you pass some night with us, they will not burn our tents. How can we refuse this kind of proposal? It was very interesting. So we decided to live in tents with them. And as they say, we share the good times, the winter. That is not a good time in a tent in Lebanon because it's very cold, and even the summer is not a good time because it's very hot. Our neighbor, the first neighbor from my tent, his name was Rami, was telling me, I'm a very important person because there are 5 states that are trying to kill me, not like you, I'm very important. And it was true. It was the Syria state, Hezbollah, that is part of the Lebanese state, Russia, and Iran, and even people coming from abroad trying to kill Iran. When he started living in Lebanon, he has other dangers to face. It was the cold, the very difficult situation, and the possibility to have work, and the very difficult situation about health and care and any kind of problem relating to the life of refugees. In fact, they are not refugees because Lebanon is not was not signed the Geneva Declaration. So if they will be very lucky, in the future they will become refugees. But at the moment they are not refugees; they are just illegal people. 2 years ago, the men from the camp is a very small camp called Tel Abbas. It was like some 100 people. They called us and they say it's impossible to live in this. So we decided to take ships, illegal ships from the port of from the harbour of Tripoli, the big town in the north of Lebanon, and we decided to try to go to Greece and then to Turkey, Greece, and then Europe. But we felt that it was very dangerous because in a refugee camp, if a family is without the man, it means that you are under any kind of danger. And when I say any kind, you can imagine the worst: sexual harassment, looting, and everything, the worst you can imagine. So we call other association and we provide 2 years and a half ago humanitarian corridors to Italy and also to France and also to Belgium. And in this way, we try a way to create a safe passage to Italy and to Europe, we can say, and for more than 1,000 people. But there was another thing. The first was living with them. It was a way to protect them when they have to go out of the camp, because when a man leaves the camp, can be arrested because they have no documents, and they are arrested. And some of us, like Alessandro, was arrested with them, and he had the luck to hear what happened to a Syrian when he's arrested. He's beaten and tortured for days, and the Lebanese police take out of them any kind of documents, even Syrian documents. So when they leave the prison, they have absolutely nothing. So we start living in a camp. The second was to provide humanitarian corridors, and the third level was someday speaking with them, they told us, we are not refugees, as you know, looking at the Lebanese law. We are human, so we want the possibility to say something about the war. That for us is very strange, because we can accept in some days maybe that they are refugees, but we don't want to accept as European people that the possibility for them to make a peace proposal is too much for them. The only thing we accept, the only man we accept to have the possibility to make a peace proposal is something with weapons, or with a great power. This is unacceptable, unacceptable. They have the right to make a peace proposal because they love their town and they refuse to do the war, to take part of the war. They refuse to take part of the war. Who is the first with the possibility to make a peace proposal if not a man who refused to make the war? So they write down this proposal, and when we met the first time through Brando and Bonifay, the European Parliament and also the French Parliament and the Italian Parliament, speaking with them, the first thing we say is, if this place is not a place or the house for this kind of proposal, which kind of purpose has this place? Exactly. If when we speak about the great values of Europe, this is not a great value of Europe to give a possibility, to give a house, to give a place to speak about peace without weapons. A peace built on looking at the possibility for different religions to live together, for coexistence. We want as Europe to learn how it's possible to live together when you are different. And that's exactly the proposal they are trying to propose to us. One of the men who wrote down this proposal is Sheikh Abdo. Sheikh Abdo, his name is Abderrahim Sian, but he's famous as Sheikh Abdo. Sheikh Abdo and his group was living not now, was living in Syria. In Syria was working for the dialogue between religion. Then was forced to escape from Syria because was under treatment. And is finally, in 2011, he get Lebanon. Then now, at the end of 2018, was forced to leave Lebanon because was under treatment to be killed or arrested. And now he's in Italy. Sheikh Abdul is one of the men who wrote down this proposal, so we can directly see who is and what is the meaning of this proposal, in which way we can, as European people, help this process. Thank you very much.
من سوريا، حمص القصير، معروف باسم الشيخ عبده. كنت أعمل مدرس في سوريا، مدرس ابتدائي وناشط مجتمع مدني في مجال المصالحة والحوار ما بين الأديان. بدأت مظاهرات للمطالبة بالتغيير وبعض حقوق الإنسان، والتي خرجت إلى الشوارع سلميا في مطلع شهر آذار في عام 2011. وطبعا النظام بدأ بمواجهة هذه التظاهرات بالقمع والعنف وإطلاق النار على المتظاهرين. غادرت سوريا في 1/8/2011 إلى منطقة طوادي خارج اللبنانية على الحدود السورية لأتابع النشاط الإنساني فيه ومساعدة الجرحى الواصلين إلى لبنان، وأيضا استقبال العائلات الهاربين من بطش النظام الديكتاتوري، وخاصة عوائل من تركوا العمل مع النظام، حيث كان النظام يقوم باعتقال عوائلهم، فكنت أقوم بتأمين مأوى لهم ومساعدتهم في الحفاظ على أرواحهم، وكان معظمهم من الأطفال والنساء. أقمت أول مخيم لاستقبال نازحي حرب في عكار باسم مخيم الإحسان، حيث وصلت أعداد كبيرة من السوريين قد هربت من الموت من حمص وريفها بعد تهجيرهم من قبل النظام وحليفه حزب الله اللبناني واحتلال بيوتهم وأراضيهم ومنعهم من العودة بحجة محاربة الإرهاب. وكان المخيم محطة استقبال للواصلين إلى لبنان، وذلك في شهر أيار عام 2013، إلى أن استقر فيه حوالي 50 عائلة موجودين فيه حتى اليوم. أسست مدرسة في المخيم لتعليم أطفاله، والذين بلغ عددهم 60 طفلا من عمر 6 سنوات إلى 12 سنة. وفي نهاية العام حققت المدرسة تغييرا كبيرا في حياة هؤلاء الأطفال، مما دفع جمعية ملاك اللبنانية، وهي جمعية خاصة، إلى بناء مدرسة بجوار المخيم لينتقل العمل إليها في بداية عام 2014 مع 460 طفلا سوريا، وذلك بالشراكة ما بين جمعية ملاك وفريق الإحسان، وذلك باسم مدرسة الإحسان. لم يكن هدفنا في المدرسة فقط هو التعليم، ولكن أيضا الدعم النفسي والاجتماعي والتربية على السلام وتقبل الآخر، إضافة إلى الرعاية الصحية له. كما نضمن لكل طفل وجبة دافئة كل يوم. مدرستنا مفتوحة كل أيام الأسبوع و 365 يوما في السنة. كان هذا العمل صعب ومحفوف بالمخاطر والتحديات في لبنان. تعرضت مرات عديدة للسجن من قبل السلطات اللبنانية بسبب نشاطي، إضافة إلى محاربتي من قبل بعض رجال دين وجهات سياسية وحزبية في لبنان، وذلك اتباع المنهج الوسطية والاعتدال وانفتاحي الكبير على الآخر من طوائف أخرى وخاصة الأوروبيين، وإقامة علاقات الشراكة والصداقة معهم، ومحاربة التطرف وعدم إدخال التعليم الديني إلى المركز. لقد حدث للكثيرين هذا الشيء، ليس لي أنا فقط. مخيمات اللاجئين يتم مداهمتها بشكل تعسفي، ويتم اعتقال الرجال في المخيمات بدون أي ذنب أو جريمة ارتكبوها لبضعة أيام ثم يخرجون من السجن، إضافة لما يعانونه من انعدام الخدمات وعدم توفر الشروط الصحية للعيش، وما تفعله بهم أيضا العواصف والأمطار والثلوج وموجات الحر في الصيف والاعتداءات المتكررة والممنهجة الأشخاص بحجج واهية ومفتعلة أحيانا تصل إلى إحراق المخيم أو طردهم من الأرض التي يقيمون خيامهم فيها وما إلى ذلك من انتهاكات واستغلال. ولكن الأسوأ والأخطر من ذلك كله هو ما تتبعه الحكومة اللبنانية من ضغوط علنية نراها ونسمعها من خلال تصريحات السياسيين والحزبيين في لبنان ابتداء من رئيس الجمهورية إلى وزير الخارجية، حيث يصل إلى الكثير من البلديات يصل هذا الأمر إلى الكثير من البلديات والأحزاب ووسائل الإعلام والذين بدورهم يقومون بتحريض الشعب اللبناني ضد النازحين من أجل أن يعودوا إلى سوريا، ويزعمون بأن سوريا أصبحت آمنة. وزادت هذه الممارسات والتصريحات بعد المبادرة الروسية قبل عدة أشهر بإعادة النازحين إلى سوريا بحجة أن سوريا أصبحت آمنة. لكننا نعرف أننا اليوم في سوريا سنموت إذا عدنا إليها. لذلك وصلنا بعد دراسة وتحليل للواقع السوري في لبنان أنه لا حل للسوريين في لبنان إلا بخروجهم من لبنان. لكن أين يمكننا الذهاب؟ نريد العودة إلى سوريا في سلام وأمان، إلى مناطق خاضعة للحماية الدولية وليس لحكم النظام وحلفاء النظام. في عام 2015 وبعد دراسة وتحليل لوضع السوريين في لبنان وما يعانونه من تحديات ومشكلات ومخاطر، قمنا بكتابة مقترح السلام بالشراكة مع أوبراسيون كولومبا، والذي تربطني بهم صداقة منذ 2012 ولثقتي بعملهم وأملي أن يصل هذا المقترح مع صوت اللاجئين السوريين في لبنان إلى أوروبا، حيث لا صوت ولا ممثل حقيقي للسوريين في لبنان في أوروبا. طبعا نحن نحضره هذا المقترح إلى كل المقار الوطني والأوروبي والدولي. آمل أن يكون هذا الاقتراح الذي يحتوي على صوت اللاجئين السوريين في لبنان، صرخة السوريين في لبنان، أن تصل إلى قلوب الجميع. وأتمنى أن نعمل جميعا من أجل السلام في سوريا ومن أجل حفظ أمن وأمان السوريين اللاجئين في لبنان. وشكرا جزيلا لكم.
Having now also heard from the campaign and the work done by Operazione Colomba, I would like to turn now to Mr. Stephen Ryan, who's the Deputy Head of the Unit for Asylum in the European Commission DG Home. Mr. Ryan, there's a few things that maybe I can already ask you to maybe focus on in your intervention. In the presentation of Mrs. Brun from DL8 Piper, she was really focusing on the importance of enhancing EU authorities' control and monitoring. When I hear control and monitoring, I obviously turn towards the European Commission, because this obviously is part of your mandate in many areas as well as in this one. So I'm wondering, what are the initiatives that are already taken to ensuring that the European regulation directives around asylum are being respected in the refugee camps on European soil? But in extension as well, what is the action towards the wider area in the European neighborhood, where there's obviously, as we've heard, many more refugees even living in dire conditions? So what are the actions that are already being taken to ensuring better living conditions, creating possibilities for asylum here in Europe, but as well for ensuring that the conditions in those camps are being living conditions are getting better. So I'm wondering if you could, for sure, at least focus on these burning questions, as well as bring us obviously your perspective based on what you have prepared today.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, and it's a privilege to have been invited to this event. Very much enjoyed the presentations made earlier about the initiative of We Are the Children to relocate refugee children from Greece to other member states, and likewise the presentation concerning Syrian refugees in Lebanon. I was going to say a few words specifically about the We Are the Children initiative and some of, I think, the practical and legal possibilities that you could avail of. So I will say something about that. You have though asked me some more general questions about the situation in Greece and the steps that the Commission is taking to help Greece to cope with the situation and to monitor the proper application of the rules there. And I can say a few words about that also specifically in relation to the situation of children, which is particularly critical, particularly important. Firstly, I would say in relation to the situation in Greece specifically, the Commission, but also other union bodies are providing a lot of assistance to Greece on the ground, both in financial form, but also in the form of expertise that's being provided by union agencies, by the Asylum Support Office in Malta, with the support of experts from member states, by Frontex, by Europol, by other agencies. So a lot of assistance is being granted. At the same time, the Commission is monitoring, as it does for all member states, the application of the asylum rules, and this involves us encouraging and also in some instances taking specific proceedings against member states in order to ensure that the rules are properly respected. And we're well aware of the significant problems there, especially when it comes to the protection of children. And we have been encouraging Greece to take some specific measures, in particular when it comes to the setting up of proper measures for guardianship of children in Greece, and also for the provision of appropriate accommodation. But a lot still remains to be done. More generally then, again specifically on children, the Commission issued in 2017 a communication on the protection of children in migration, which set out a series of different measures that should be taken at the union level, but also by member states in order to protect children at all stages of migration. And by at all stages, I mean assisting in the protection of children already earlier in the route before they arrive in the European Union, and also once they arrive here in the EU. Just to give you a few examples, it targeted in particular the need for children to be protected upon their first arrival here in the European Union, providing, for example, that in the hotspots there should always be specific child protection officers on the spot in order to look after children, that there should be specific guardianship arrangements for children, that integration measures should be put in place as well in order to ensure, for example, that they would have access to mainstream education and so on. Then, as Brando mentioned in his introduction, we have also proposed that some very specific improvements be made to the existing asylum legislation, both in terms of the reception conditions, procedures, Dublin regulation, in order to reinforce child protection provisions. That, of course, remains a work in progress for well-known reasons. Those discussions are still ongoing and might be still for some time to come. Looking outside the European Union, the Commission has consistently been encouraging member states to step up their resettlement efforts, I think with some considerable success if you compare the situation today to in the past. The Commission called about 18 months ago for 50,000 persons to be relocated. over a 2-year period, and in fact pledges have been made by member states to fill and even to exceed that number, but the implementation of that is still ongoing, and that obviously would be designed to address resettlement, for example, of some of the persons mentioned in the last presentation by Colombo. These are the kinds of persons. Some of these persons would at least be eligible for resettlement. Then, lastly, I wanted to say something about your specific initiative, so the We Are the Children initiative, about the relocation of refugees from Greece. And this is something that I think is a very worthwhile initiative, and is something, in fact, that fits very well into something that the Commission has been encouraging for some time. Just to give a little bit of background to relocation within the EU, it's a relatively new concept, if you like. Until 2015, when we had the so-called the beginning of the migration crisis, there had hardly been any relocation within the European Union. There was a small amount of refugees who had been relocated after already having been recognized from Malta to other EU countries over a number of years. But in 2015, the Commission proposed that there should be a large-scale relocation of asylum seekers from Greece and Italy to other EU member states. And this was, in fact, a very revolutionary idea, and was actually extremely controversial when it was discussed at the political level, but a decision was taken by the Council that this should happen. And over a 2-year period, some 35,000 persons were in fact relocated, both from Greece and from Italy. And included in that number were over 800 unaccompanied minors, as well as a number of other minors as well who were relocated together with their parents. And a lot of important lessons, I think, were learned from that experience, especially when it comes to the relocation of unaccompanied minors. It was, for example, concluded that let's say a best practice workflow needs to be in place in terms of assessing whether it's in the best interests of a particular child to be transferred to another member state, and an agreed process was developed at that time, which I think can still be used in an ongoing way now for voluntary relocations that can take place still today. And that involves the guardians in Greece agreeing together with the guardians in the member state of relocation on what steps should be taken in order to ensure that the child's best interests should be looked after. Since the expiry of those of the relocation decisions, so the 2-year period that I mentioned, the Commission has been encouraging voluntary relocation from member states that are under pressure. That would obviously include Greece. And there is financial assistance that is available. In most cases, that would be financial assistance in the form of a lump sum of €6,000 per person resettled. There is also assistance that can be provided by the union agencies in this regard. And we have seen over the last few months some relocations taking place specifically of persons who've been disembarked from some of the boats where we had standoff